Ever wonder how a single night can shatter everything you expect and reveal who truly stays? The storm outside was nothing compared to the one inside the Hawthorne mansion. Rain hammered against the windows, but it was Edward Hawthorne's voice that truly pierced the night. "What the hell do you think you're doing in my bed?" The words struck like gunfire. His figure, framed in the doorway, dripping water, every muscle twisted with fury. He barely noticed the cold on his skin. His whole presence was wired, eyes ablaze with disbelief that etched itself deep into every line of his angular face. On the bed lay Maya Williams, jolted upright by the sudden intrusion, heart thundering beneath her ribs, not from guilt, but from the unspoken accusations in Edward's glare. Ethan and Eli, the twins she'd been tasked to care for, finally found peace in sleep, curled safely at her sides. The only movement came from Ethan's teddy bear, rising and falling with each gentle breath. A single moment, suspended in fear. Maya lifted her hands, careful, measured, her voice a fragile whisper. "I can explain!" The sentiment hung in the air, and with it, the trembling innocence of two boys who, after countless nights of terror, finally slept undisturbed. But Edward's rage was a force of its own. Eli whimpered, tears pricking at his eyelids. Ethan's nose began to bleed, bright spots staining the tranquility Maya had fought to create. She didn't get to finish her explanation. Edward's palm flashed through the air, slapping Maya across the cheek. The sound cracked the silence, more violent than the thunder outside. Maya staggered, but held her composure, shock painting her gaze rather than pain. For a moment, the world narrowed to just their breathing and Edward's words, guttural with authority. "You're fired. Get out. Now." Maya's breath hitched, but she steadied herself, palm pressed to the stinging heat on her cheek. She barely whispered her reason, the truth soft but unwavering. "They begged me not to go. I stayed because they were scared. They're finally safe." Edward didn't care. She was dismissed, cast out from the home where she'd offered comfort when every expert before her had failed. With a gentle, wordless ritual, Maya kissed Eli's forehead, then Ethan's, in silent farewell. Her resignation was a quiet act of love, unnoticed by the man whose judgment outweighed gratitude. She slipped on her shoes, crossed the threshold past Edward's frozen stance, and descended the stairs, where the red flush on her cheek told Mrs. Keller everything she needed to know. Maya said not a word. Subscribe and hit like. Our powerful stories add years to your life. Join our Story Lovers Club and let us know in the comments, where are you listening from? Outside, the storm eased to a sorrowful drizzle. Maya stepped out into the damp world, her coat shielding her not so much from the cold, but from the ache of disgrace. Every footstep away reverberated as a loss the house could not afford. Upstairs in the master bedroom, Edward stood motionless, adrenaline ebbing into a queasy uncertainty. He replayed the moment in his mind, fists clenched, breathing sharp. Returning to the bed, he observed the twins. Ethan's brow, normally furrowed in sleep, was smooth. Eli's fist, always clenched in anxious unrest, lay open and relaxed against the quilt. They were not sedated or exhausted from tears. They were simply resting. For the first time in memory, there was total peace. A sick realization seeped into Edward's marrow. Maya had achieved what 14 nannies, specialists, and therapists never could. Guilt gnawed at him, icy and relentless. All the money he'd poured into childcare, all the professionals he'd cycled through, and it was Maya, gentle, soft-spoken Maya, who quieted the haunted nights of his sons. He covered his face, the shame pooling in his chest, heavier with each breath. On the nightstand sat a single folded note, one last message from the woman he'd cast out. He uncreased the paper with trembling hands. The words were plain, unsigned, impossible to ignore. If you can't stay for them, at least don't push away the ones who will. He read it again and again, each reading forcing him to face truths he'd long buried. In his reflection, he saw not the stoic guardian he tried to be, but a man warped by loss, rigid with fear, suffocating under the weight of his own control. Downstairs, the housekeeper, Mrs. Keller, watched the retreating figure of Maya through the rain-blurred glass. Her heart twisted with sympathy and indignation. She had seen many come and go from the Hawthorne estate, but none had connected with the twins as Maya did. There was a kind of magic in her patience, something that offered solace to those children who had only known chaos since their mother's passing. Mrs. Keller wiped her eyes, recalling the soft way Maya spoke to the boys and the gentle certainty with which she confronted their father's lingering storms. The emptiness Maya left behind seemed to widen the halls and deepen every shadow. Even the portraits lining the walls appeared to mourn, their painted eyes more sorrowful than ever. The silence now was brittle, edged not with peace, but the sharp pain of loss. Morning broke with a bleak, uncertain light. Edward moved mechanically through his routines, but the house felt colder, its order laced with regret. By the time he entered the twins' room, the boys were already awake. Their faces creased with confusion. "Where's Maya?" whispered Eli, clutching his blanket with trembling hands. Edward knelt between them, searching for the right words and finding none that would soften the truth. "She had to leave," was all he could manage, his voice rough. Ethan's lip quivered. Eli's small fist balled tightly at his side. There was a weight behind their silence, an accusation unspoken but felt. The loss of Maya was a wound, fresh and raw. Maya walked through the city, resistance in each step, tears refraining out of sheer determination. The streets were washed clean by rain, reflecting tireless yellow light and the hope she tried desperately to nurture. She had lost her job, but not her resolve. With every block, her thoughts wandered back to the twins, their bravery, their trust, their longing for security that she had, just for a moment, helped bloom. She reached the bus stop, the evening sting settling on her skin. But she straightened her back and pulled her coat tighter. She would not succumb to despair. Someone would need her warmth and patience, even if it was no longer the Hawthorne boys. She promised herself that. Meanwhile, the twins clung silently to each other as the day stretched on, the rooms echoing with emptiness. Meals passed untouched. Toys remained still. Mrs. Keller did her best to comfort them, but her arms were not Maya's, and her lullabies could not quiet the fears that had so quickly returned. Hours blurred by, and the boys finally found uneasy sleep as dusk fell. Edward lingered outside their door, listening to their whispers, pleading for Maya, apologizing to each other for things they couldn't control. The sound of their heartbreak tore through whatever fortress he'd built around his own. Each sob and sniffle was a mirror to the grief he'd tried to deny. That night was sleepless for Edward. Shadows played upon the ceiling as guilt gnawed deeper, relentless and cold. He scrolled through old security footage, watching Maya soothe his children through nightmares, her low voice and calming presence transforming terror into rest. Every smile the twins had given her mocked his rashness. He wandered the quiet estate, haunted by echoes of laughter and gentle scoldings that would never return. The emptiness pressed in until it was unbearable, a suffocating reminder that some things once lost cannot be easily recovered. But for the first time, Edward began to wonder if it wasn't too late. If by some fragile chance he could right his cruel mistake. The following morning dawned uneven and anxious. Edward, disheveled and sleepless, found himself gazing at the children from the threshold, uncertainty shadowing his usually decisive features. The boys didn't run to greet him. Instead, Eli glanced up with quiet accusation, and Ethan buried his face deeper in his pillow. The absence of Maya, like a silent phantom, hovered heavy over the room. For the first time, Edward felt the consequences of his actions as a tangible ache, a loss that went far beyond the mere departure of staff. Haunted by that stark realization, Edward moved through the day like a man condemned, shame following close on his heels. Each attempt to comfort the boys fell flat, his words stiff and unfamiliar, his hugs awkward, lacking the warmth that Maya once wrapped around them so easily. Mrs. Keller, the ever-watchful soul of the house, could only observe in sorrow. The household was a shadow of its former self, the routines disrupted and spirits dulled. She found Edward standing alone at the window late in the afternoon, brow furrowed in thought. Gently she approached, setting a hand on his arm. "They miss her," she whispered, her voice weighted with empathy and subtle reproach. "They need more than a roof and bread. They need love, her kind of love." Edward, usually rigid in pride, found himself nodding, the words piercing his denial. He finally understood. The problem was never Maya. The problem was his fear-fueled blindness. Her final words echoed in his mind, a quiet plea, not for herself, but for the boys. He grasped his phone, thumb hovering, debating. Would she answer if he called? Could any apology undo what he'd done? Desperation finally surfaced above pride. With trembling fingers, he dialed Maya's number, a storm of humility and hope surging inside him. Each ring sounded like a heartbeat, loud in the stillness. When she finally picked up, her voice was soft, cautious, colored by both pain and strength. Edward struggled to find the right words. "Maya, I'm—" The apology caught in his throat. He forced himself to swallow his shame. "I was wrong. There's no excuse for what I did." "Eli and Ethan, they need you. I need you. Please, come back." Silence hovered before Maya responded, her answer measured and resolute. "I will not return to any home where I must fear violence. Not for me, and not for your sons." The resolve in her voice threatened to break him, yet it inspired hope. A promise that things could be different, if only he were brave enough to change. Touched to his core, Edward promised, voice cracking, "Things will be different. I swear it." She paused, weighed his sincerity, then said, "Let me think, for the children's sake." For the next 24 hours, the house held its breath. The boys barely spoke. Edward's anxiety twisted every minute into an hour. Mrs. Keller moved through her tasks with a silent plea in her heart, praying for Maya's return, praying for the healing that only forgiveness could bring. Maya spent the night reflecting, a battle between her deep affection for the twins and her need for self-respect. Memories surfaced, laughter, shared stories, the trust she'd earned, and the progress they'd made together. Could she trust Edward's vow of transformation? Would the home be a place of safety rather than fear? Her decision, when it came, was quiet but unwavering. She dialed Edward's number the following morning, her voice steady with boundaries and hope. "For the boys, I will return, but this time on my terms." When Maya re-entered the Hawthorne estate that morning, the air itself seemed to shift. Hope replaced dread. Possibility crowded out regret. The twins heard the familiar chime of the front door and rushed down the stairs, their faces brightening in an explosion of joy and relief. Eli wrapped his arms around Maya with wordless gratitude, and Ethan's laughter rang out, clear and honest as sunlight through rain clouds. Mrs. Keller smiled, discreetly wiping tears from her cheeks, warmth blooming across the once somber foyer. Edward watched the reunion from a distance, his heart pounding. He was a man transformed by humility, a father learning at last to let go of control and embrace trust. He knew Maya had returned, not for him, but for the children, and he vowed to honor her boundaries, promising himself never to squander this second chance. Maya set her terms clearly: respect, safety, and peace. No slamming doors, no raised voices, and if ever her position was threatened by anger, she would leave for good. No negotiations. Edward agreed, repentant and sincere, and Mrs. Keller pledged her unwavering support. The household found its new rhythm, guided by Maya's nurturing presence. and the heartfelt lessons of vulnerability. Gradually, the wounds that had divided the family began to heal. The twins grew more confident, their laughter filling the halls once more. Each day they woke eager to greet Maya, secure in the knowledge that she would protect them and listen, no matter how small their fears. Edward too changed. Gone was the rigid authoritarian. In his place stood a father who asked for help, who apologized when he faltered, and who listened for the first time in his life. He shared quiet moments with his sons, learning the power of a gentle approach and the trust that patience. He met Maya with gratitude rather than pride, his actions mirroring the sincerity of his apologies. In time, the Hawthorne house became not just a place to reside, but a genuine home, a sanctuary born of forgiveness, growth, and respect. Each soul inside was transformed, their scars mending in the light of empathy. For Maya, the challenge had never been merely employment. It was about changing lives, about transforming pain into healing. She guided the twins in resilience. She helped Edward rediscover the love he'd buried. Her heart expanded, welcoming the joys and challenges of her role anew, stronger than before. Even Mrs. Keller found her burdens eased, watching what once was fractured become beautifully whole. The community noticed the difference, too. Where whispers of sorrow had followed the Hawthorne name for years, now stories of renewed happiness echoed beyond their doors. Maya's courage had reshaped not just a family, but the spirit of a home, compelling others to believe in second chances and the restorative force of kindness. The journey had begun in tumult, but it ended in hope and in the simple grace of finding each other after being lost. That stormy night was never forgotten, yet it came to symbolize more than pain. It marked the turning point, the moment true growth began. When darkness returned, the family faced it together, kinder and braver with each trial. And so within those walls and beyond, the legacy of Maya's compassion continued, a story not just of survival, but of transformation, where lessons bloom, resilience, and love unspoken, yet endlessly proven. It was the lesson that echoed through every heart. Healing is possible, if you only dare to let it in.